Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, John Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. Sandra, we just recorded one episode on a topic around kind of sending your young adult to a really stellar program called Eagle U University. So even before we get started on this topic, if you're listening to this, check out that episode. It's really interesting, and I think it might provide some opportunities for someone in your family. But Sandra, we have a more business-related topic for this episode, and that is about becoming an adaptive leader. So as our president, you help shape leadership development here at Boomer Consulting, and you help work with firms in the areas of leadership development. So speak to us about becoming an adaptive leader. What is that adaptive leadership model?
So, this adaptive leadership model has come out of the changes in our world over the last 2 to probably 5 years. And I'd even say clear back to 2009, we started watching this adaptive leadership model happen. And really what it is it's about how companies are embracing change, how they are wanting people to try and experiment with new ideas. So it's really telling people, don't just do it this way, experiment, try to figure out. So experimentation is a part of what they're looking at, and then innovation. So it really is kind of putting the wheels underneath of a business model where it used to be so cut and dried, like this is how you do things, and saying, every business is a little different and every client base is a little different. So we want to create a environment or create a leadership model that allows people to change, experiment, and innovate more openly. And there's a book that was really interesting. I think it was written back in 2009, somewhere around there. The Practice of Adaptive Leadership, Tools and Tactics for Changing Your Organization and the World. And it was published by Harvard Business Review. And that's a good place to probably start if you don't really know much about this. But that's a great book. It's not overly long, not too much like a textbook. Really interesting, but it's a great book. And we've been moving as a profession. We have been moving in this direction for many years, but the last 2 years has challenged those firms and those organizations out there that have started using adaptive leadership model, even if they didn't know that's what they were doing, because it challenged us to change more. It challenged us to experiment more. It challenged us to innovate more. There are more firms that have innovation committees now than I have ever seen before. There are more firms that chose to go to remote work and flexible work and sabbatical programs over the last 2 years than I've seen in all the years I've done this work. Things like Power BI and analytics is becoming a norm. So change has been happening. We probably didn't realize it was this new business model, but that's the business model we're talking about here when we talk about being adapting to the things that are happening in our world and around us in a very positive way.
I can totally see why this topic has just kind of started to blossom here recently in our profession based off the reasons you just outlined in terms of the last couple of years. Firms are doing things differently, maybe doing things in a way that they never dreamed they would be doing. And with that comes the need for different types of leadership skills. And so, Sandra, as you work with firms in this area, what strategies, solutions, tips are you coaching firms on in this area?
So I'm going to tell you that I believe getting your C-suite involved from the very beginning and really starting to have deep and meaningful conversations around how to develop the solutions that you need within your company in order to be that change leader. I think that's important. I think you need to get some education. So even though we're doing it and we're kind of doing it without thinking about it, the more education you have in that area, the better you will be and the stronger you will become to use those skills that you've been learning going forward. So I would say get some education, and then ensure that your learning and development professional is really in the middle of all of this. It takes change management and a lot of new skills that we may not have really used before. It's like using a muscle that you've never used before. We're having to use muscles right now in the leadership area that we've never used before. So a few of those are like empathy. You know, if you had said 25 years ago, when I started in banking that many years ago, or in this profession so many years ago, you have to be an empathetic leader. What you would have probably heard was, I'm not here to be empathetic, I'm here to be the boss, right? Today, empathy is a part of being a good leader. Embracing failure. Again, if you back it up, failure was a bad thing years ago. Today, you know what? Embrace failure, because usually what you fail at, when something doesn't work, you've learned something that gives you a baseline higher than you were before, and now you get to go even higher. So embracing failure, diversity. Understanding that diversity within your company in all different kinds of ways, diversity in how you work, diversity in the population of your talent, diversity in the things that you know and the skills that we have, all of that, super important. Constructive conflict. You know, years ago, you and I, John, taught classes on conflict, and we still do. I mean, that's still a part of our repertoire, right? But really understanding that constructive conflict makes us better is a real feather in your hat. I mean, that makes you really great. And then just change leadership. So one of the things that I was thinking about, besides reading about it, besides thinking about what you should do, I got to tell you, there's some great classes on this on LinkedIn Learning. There are some great sessions you can read. You can have a book club in your firm and read the book and then have discussions about it. The more you talk about it, the more it will become real. The more you learn about it, the more it will become real. So I think that's where I would at least start the conversation.
That's great, Sandra. And there's so much to unpack there. And you mentioned the DEI component, you know, you mentioned empathy, things of that sort. I also think too, to add on that is, you know, the diversity of services that firms are offering now
Good
and
point.
will be
Yeah.
and will be offering into the future is creating, my goodness, a lot of leadership diversity within firms too. How firms looked in the past at the
Yep.
partner level, it's going to look drastically different maybe into the future. And,
Yep.
you know, with that just comes different leadership needs. Not every service line needs the exact type of leadership in order to grow it and to make it a reality. And so I think that's a component we're seeing in firms as well. Sandra, you started to talk about, you know, kind of the crucial conversations and the different types of leadership training. I think there's a play here with this topic in the Colby Index. And some of our listeners might not even be aware of what the Colby Index is. Would you be willing to kind of talk about that and maybe how that relates to this topic?
Absolutely. So yes, so Colby Index, and that is KOLBE. Many try to spell it with C, but it's a K. Colby is an index that we started using many years ago when we started our company. And the main reason we started using it was to build better teams, teams that would support and collaborate well together. And so besides knowing yourself a little bit more, it does that. There are 3 parts of the mind. Colby will tell us cognitively how you will like to work. How do you like to do the work that you do? And when you take that piece of your mind and how you think and you apply it to adaptive learning, what you find is that different people will act and react differently as they work through change leadership, as they work through constructive conflict, as they work through being empathetic. It's not that you can't do any of those things. You will, but you might do them a little differently, or you might think about them a little differently. And knowing that piece of who you are, first, personally, you'll be a better leader. And then secondarily, knowing that about your team members, you'll be able to help them be better team leaders. And quite frankly, you'll be able to use their strengths. So both John and I are Colby certified. And when I think about how, and we have a partner group of six people now, and there are different Colby types within that group. how we look at change leadership is a little different, not wrong, just different. And understanding each other helps us all be better leaders. It also helps that all of our team members know our Colby scores and we know theirs, because then you're gonna help them learn differently. You're gonna help them innovate differently. And all of those differences make for a very, very strong company. So I don't know, John, would you add anything to that?
No,
Or anything?
that was a really great definition. The word instincts come to mind. What Colby measures is
Yeah.
our instincts, and how we kind of pursue solving problems or creating solutions is really different. Even between you and I, Sandra, we
Yeah.
work really well together, but we have very different Colbys. And just knowing that about each other, as you mentioned, is really, really beneficial. And
Yep,
so
absolutely.
I think the firm of the future is about kind of capturing all of that, not trying to make everyone the same. So as you work with firms, talk about some of the successes you've seen. I know some firms are maybe further ahead than others, and you always seem to be working with firms that are ahead. Speak to that a little bit. Where do you see the results kind of shaping for this?
Yeah, I gotta tell you, the firms that have maybe not even intentionally, I mean, if you ask them, oh my gosh, you've got a great adaptive leadership style here, they might look at you a little bit like deer in headlights, like, I don't even know what that is. But if they've applied those, all of those characteristics that we were talking about earlier, what you will find is that the firms that are doing a great job there, they're much more collaborative, and you can feel the excitement throughout the organization. You can go to any level of the organization and they'll openly talk about, oh, we just started a new innovation project, or, oh, we just started doing something new and different. And so in the tax department was one that got that started. It wasn't a partner. It was maybe even a brand new employee that just got started and found something that really could change the way the firm was. You can feel that excitement. A lot less turnover. People get excited about being a part of an organization that has this much positivity going on. And so we also find that there's more individuals wanting to help in the process. So they actually are diving in, and I'll talk about, there's one firm that has a great innovation committee, and they get together once a year and they do this innovation workshop, and anybody can come. You can apply to come, but what you have to be ready to do is come up with what will make our firm better this year. What's one big thing that we could do to make ourselves better? And they work for 2 days in small groups, and then they present, and then they decide on which one of those innovation ideas is going to go forward. And whoever was on that committee leads it. And 2 years ago, the person that led it was someone who'd only been in this profession for 2 years. So we're not talking about somebody who had, a ton of experience, but the idea that they came up with, and that one happened to be on pricing, they made it go forward. So I think that that's amazing. And I got to tell you, there's less turnover, higher profits, and they're more sustainable. You can tell that firm is going to be around for a long, long time. So it's worth the it is worth the pain that sometimes you go through, and it is worth the work and the effort that you put into it. So that's what I see.
And you started to answer the next question a little bit, but the next question I have for you is, how is this relevant to outside the profession? Sometimes we're guilty of only looking within our kind of four corners of our profession, but if we look out, we see things that are happening that we need to be paying attention to. So how is this topic related to outside the profession?
Much like other topics that we talk about, this one is prime for this. This is a theory that it was not created for public accounting. It was created for business in general. And I will say that entrepreneurial companies and a lot of the tech companies that are out there, new emerging companies that are out there, they're starting with this business model. They don't have the old business model to have to overcome. So I think it's for any businesses out there. And quite frankly, if I was starting a brand new business, or if I had a young person that came to us, like one of the ones that goes through our leadership academy or something like that, and said, I'm ready to start my own business, I will bet money that this is the kind of business model that they are going to enact, right? So it's not just for public accounting. It's for anybody, any business. And so therefore, for all of you listening that are in public accounting, this is the thing that your clients should be doing, right? So it's a pass-through thing. Your clients should be doing this and you should be coaching it.
Yep. No, that's really interesting. And I think there's probably also a play, and you can confirm this, Sandra, of a lot of people are leaving firms due to lack of adaptive leadership. And so
Good point.
we are now in competition, right? And we've always been, but maybe it feels more accelerated right now just due to the capacity demands put on firms right now.
Yeah.
But sometimes some of your best people are looking for that adaptive leadership model somewhere else. Are you seeing that play through here?
Without a doubt. It saddens me greatly when really good people that are in firms, we meet them in the leadership academies, we meet them at strategic planning, we meet them when we do consulting for growth or leadership or talent or technology. I mean, we meet some of the most amazing people when we're doing the work that we do. And the reality is, when we get the phone call that says, we just lost so-and-so, and they went to work for a client, or they started their own business, or whatever it is, it just makes my heart go sad, because they could have been amazing right there where they were at, but they didn't feel like they were going to have the opportunity. And I think when you talk about adaptive leadership, the other thing adaptive leaders do is they see the brilliance in other people and they let that shine, right? It doesn't mean that they have to take the same career path that everybody else has taken. It doesn't mean that they have to be the same as what we've seen in the past. It just means that you found the brilliance in them and you help them achieve that right where they're at, not in some other company. So yeah, we're seeing it. We don't like it, but we see it.
Yep. So Sandra, our listeners are probably interested right now in this framework and thinking, okay, how do we apply more of that in our firm? If our listeners, when they stop listening to this episode, just go and do one thing related to this topic, what would your recommendation be?
Well, I thought about this a lot before our recording, and I thought about two things. So I'm going to give you two. First one I would say is the book that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Get It. Start a book club, and maybe not with everybody in the firm, but have the C-suite people, maybe your directors of certain areas, anybody who's interested, talk it and use it, right? How could we use this information in our business? So I think that's one thing. And the second thing is, maybe you should make this your overarching theme for your strategic planning this year, and have a facilitator help infuse all of these kinds of things that are in adaptive leadership into your strategic planning session. I think that would be an amazing way to get started, and you can celebrate the things you're already doing well, and you can adapt and bring in some of those new innovative things that you hadn't really thought about doing yet. So I would do both of those things.
Excellent advice. All right, Sandra. Well, that concludes this episode of the Boomer Briefing. As always, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, John. It was a pleasure, and it was a pleasure to interact with our audience.
Awesome. And for our listeners, if you like these topics, we release new episodes every Tuesday morning. We always change it up from either technology, process, talent, growth, or leadership, but they are all relevant to your business. So please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast if you have not already, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks so much.